Hello world, I am back with another video that is sure to get me put back into YouTube jail. Mass Formation Psychosis. What is it? Everyone's talking about it. Is it just another form of mass hysteria? Well, kind of. That's what this video is about and what we're about to go into right now. Now, this has been making the rounds recently. It sort of popped off in the public sphere when Dr. Robert Malone went on Joe Rogan. Dr. Robert Malone was one of the original researchers in the mRNA vaccines, and he's been dubbed the inventor of mRNA technology. He was not the inventor. He was one of the original researchers way back in the day. Now, he was taken off of Twitter because he was spreading misinformation. Whether or not this is misinformation is a whole nother can of worms. This was many strikes for him. He is one of the scientists, one of the doctors who does not agree with the popular COVID narrative. We're not going to go into that. We're not going to go into censorship here. He was kicked off of Twitter the day before he was set to go on to Joe Rogan. Joe Rogan is also a popular villain right now, but I don't see him as such. He's trying to have this debate. He's trying to have this debate in public. Twitter does not want them to have the debate on Twitter. Whole can of worms. Regardless, he went on to the Joe Rogan Experience, which is now on Spotify, and he discussed mass formation psychosis. People credit Dr. Malone with coming up with this term, but he did not come up with the term. I originally heard it from Dr. Mattias Desmet, and he is out of the university, he's out of Belgium, the University of Ghent, I believe. Dr. Mattias Desmet has been all over social media trying to warn people about mass formation psychosis. What does it mean? It's actually a fairly complicated term because here I'm thinking, is it mass psychosis formation and the language barrier makes it mass formation psychosis? Dr. Mattias Desmet speaks perfect English, just spitballing why it's this word order. What does the formation describe, the mass or the psychosis? This is why it was easy to identify this term when I heard it again, because it's a unique order of words. Dr. Malone was not the first person to mention this on Joe Rogan. Dr. Peter McCullough, who was another one of the doctors, a cardiologist, very well respected in his field, tried to warn the public about this as well, also from Mattias Desmet. I'm also going to link an interview at the bottom with Dr. Desmet. He has degrees in statistics as well as psychology. So he's uniquely able to identify what is happening. Just to let you know, I'm going to present it as I know it, and then we're going to question it. No judgment here, one way or the other. You may not agree that this is a mass psychosis. You may think this is a mass psychosis. I'm just telling you what people are talking about. Now, if you've been following this channel all year, you know full well about mass hysteria. We've been going into mass hysteria all of 2021, the second part of 2021, when it became obvious that a lot of people were leaving reality, as we should say. We discussed it initially with Dr. Donald, not about COVID specifically, but what is the definition of insane? If everybody's going insane, are they insane? This is a psychiatrist who treats the mentally ill on the streets of Los Angeles. And he said, if everybody is going insane, it is no longer insanity. Now, I'm not saying that as far as COVID goes, everybody is going insane. It's much more complicated than that. But just to let you know that we've had many videos to deal with mass psychosis on this channel, mass hysteria. If you want to go back and rewatch the Crucible video, if you haven't seen the Crucible video about the witch trials and the Red Scare of the 1950s, I recommend you do that. We discussed this in Pontypool, how madness can spread through words, through ideas. That was to do with the Tourette's, which is spreading through TikTok and spreading through YouTube. People are actually getting Tourette's by watching people who have Tourette's. So it's much more complicated than I have time to go into right now, that maybe I have the qualifications to go into. I am sure somebody is going to write many volumes on this when we are older, and we can look back and say, this is exactly what happened. But just to let you know, the 4 steps of mass formation psychosis. 1, prolonged isolation. We have had this over the lockdown. This happens in cults. That's why they like to isolate them from their families. This happens online a lot. This happens really online a lot because people can go into their niches, they can go into their the forums, and they don't have to listen to the outside world. You can be isolated in modern society. We have all of the modern amenities which allow you to do so, like Postmates, food delivery. You don't have to leave your house. You don't have to leave your mental sphere. You don't have to speak to people who don't already agree with you. So there's that. Number one, isolation. Number two, now this is somewhat unique, are things that are taken away, privileges taken away, things that people adapted to and they got used to having, going outside, for example, that gets taken away. So you know from our cult videos, this channel was supposed to be just jokes and making fun of cults and religion and having a good time. And then what happened? The world lost its mind. So I will be doing more cult videos, but as we know from our cult videos, it's important to take things away so that you can give them back. Haha. Cult leaders know. Anyway, and so what was taken away over the lockdowns? Well, our basic freedom, going to school, a lot of amenities people had gotten used to, a lot of people who used to go to the gym a lot, that was taken away. They were deprived in some way. Deprivation, sleep deprivation, food deprivation, not specifically to do with this because people were not deprived of food over COVID, but something is taken away. Now, step two, something taken away. Now, step three, free floating anxiety. We have that in abundance over COVID. Over the lockdowns, we've had this free floating anxiety, however, before COVID, at least going back to Trump, before that even, we've had the free floating anxiety. Now I'm probably showing my age here, but the first I remember really noticing it just in society in general, noticing it that it's a problem is probably after 9/11. And so we started with the free floating anxiety there. And then after the recession, 2008, more anxiety. We have a lot of free floating anxiety. I don't think it's fair to blame it on COVID or the lockdowns. It's there. And then, of course, what happened with Trump? There was the Trump derangement syndrome. Some people think he's the Antichrist. I've seen convincing arguments he is the Antichrist, but you all know who I think is the real Antichrist. Regardless, there is the free floating anxiety. And not to take this lightly, because you know I never would. But if you change the name of the United States of America to the United States of Anxiety, who would notice? At least you're being honest. Now, step four is that you have a solution which an authority gives you. The powers that be, whoever's in charge, they say, I have an answer to all of your problems. So that is what mass formation psychosis is in the general lexicon right now. If you look at these four factors, it's hard to argue that we are not all experiencing some form of mass formation psychosis right now. Whether you are in the pro-vaccine, pro-mandate camp, or you're in the anti-vaccine or anti-mandate camp, there is madness afloat. We are kind of free-floating in a time of chaos, and it's terrifying if you stop to look at it. Don't stop to look. Why you gotta stop to look at things all the time? Just don't. Now, just because something has a name doesn't mean that it's entirely real, doesn't mean it's entirely accurate, doesn't mean that that is all that's going on. After the Joe Rogan interview, mass formation psychosis started to trend. And so people everywhere, people are like, oh, this is what's going on right now, this is what is really happening. It's a good thing we have a term to describe what is happening. Anyway, when Mattias Desmet, Dr. Mattias Desmet, originally offered this idea to the public, it wasn't necessarily about the vaccine. He offered this idea in response to the lockdowns because, I don't know if you remember, but the initial models about the lockdowns where we have to lock down because this disease is going to kill 1 or 2 or even more % of the population. And those models, they didn't add up. They didn't come true. So Dr. Mattias Desmet noticed that the death numbers in his nation of Belgium were not adding up to 1 or 2%. And still, the lockdowns persisted. And they persisted all over the world. They persisted all over Europe. And we have not discussed this on this channel yet, but lockdown measures to lock down everybody, not just quarantine the sick, but to lock down everybody is relatively new. And they were originally offered, the idea was originally offered by a high school student for a science fair project under one of the dumbest presidents we've ever had, President Bush. I still believe he was the dumbest president. So one of his staff had a child who made a science fair experiment or science fair prediction and said, what if we just lock down everybody? And people were like, maybe we shouldn't. Cut to 15 years later, and that's the policy. Okay, so Dr. Desmet said, okay, this is madness. This is madness. This is what we're doing right now. So he coined the term to deal with lockdowns, saying that, look, these models are not true. We're acting off of information that is not true. Why is everybody like this? Well, he says about 30% of the people are under this sort of mass hypnosis. They're buying hook, line, and sinker everything that the media is saying. Another 30% do not believe what the media is saying because they don't see it with their own eyes. Fair enough. And then another 40%, this might be the smartest 40%, are just going along with it because you don't want to be right when everybody else is wrong. I forget who said that originally, but if you are with the group, they can't individually point you out and say you were wrong, even if the group is wrong. We dealt with this in the Crucible video with the witch trials. The people who stood up and said, hey, there aren't any witches. They're like, you're saying that because you're a witch. I'm like, no, I'm just saying that I have seen no evidence of witches. Witch hanger. And they did. They hanged these people. So you don't want to be right when everybody else is wrong. And if you know that everybody's going crazy, it looks like your best bet is to just go along with it. So that 40% is not hypnotized, but they are going along with it for self-preservation. And can you really blame them for that? Now, some criticism of mass formation psychosis. If you do a Google search of mass formation psychosis, you're going to find a lot of criticism of it because the popular news media, the accepted narrative, believes that this is bunk. They believe that this is a right-wing talking point and that it is just a word, a catchphrase that people are using to vilify their enemies, to say that their enemies are going insane. Look at what they're doing. We don't have to listen to them because they are mad. Particularly, I read this article in Forbes by a man called Bruce Y. Lee. Bruce Y. Lee, not the Bruce Lee, no relation, as far as I know. And he mocks the idea completely. He says, mass formation psychosis, what is that? You mean conspiracy theorists? Now, if you went on Twitter after the Dr. Malone interview, you know that that is what a lot of the blue check marks were saying, was that conspiracy theorists are an example of mass formation psychosis. And they're not wrong. Now, this is funny. I laugh because it's funny, cosmic funny. It's not funny, live in it funny. Ugh. We are in a bad place where half of the country is calling the other half insane, and the other half is calling the other half insane. And now they both have a new term for it. So that's good. Anyway, this Forbes contributor, Bruce Y. Lee, completely mocks the idea, says conspiracy theorists are examples of mass formation psychosis. My biggest criticism of the Lee article is its awful jokes. Just terrible, terrible boomer jokes. But he makes some really good points between the jokes. Like, can we not do this? If you want to make fun of legitimate social concerns, get a YouTube page. Don't write for Forbes. I expect news when I read you Forbes. Unfortunately, Lee, I guess, has not been on YouTube all year. Is not familiar with Dr. Desmet, and so was not able to place where the term originally came from. Kim Iverson does a better job of this in her Hill Radar because she actually clips the Peter McCullough interview. Regardless, Lee hypothesizes that it came from groupthink, the formation of a mob, and so you can tell the mob things that are simply not true. And they'll believe you if they don't have any outside information. Lee says that Malone followers, Dr. Malone followers, are an example of mass formation psychosis gone awry. Now, here's the thing. Here is the problem, is that, as we have discussed on this channel, mass formation psychosis, okay, what does that mean? This is groupthink. And groupthink happens all the time. It happens all the time. It doesn't just happen with COVID. It doesn't just happen with cults. It happens on the daily. In fact, if you read corporate magazines, business journals, they'll warn you about groupthink because it is so common when groups get together for this groupthink to happen, for people to establish a consensus, even if that consensus isn't reality. And even if they don't necessarily believe in the consensus themselves, they'll censor themselves, they'll trick themselves into believing that the consensus is the real thing, not because it's objectively true, but because it's better to be with the group. The term mass formation psychosis, obviously, it's very vaguely defined. What is it? Dr. Malone on Joe Rogan uses the Nazis as an example. He said in the 1930s in Germany, there was mass formation psychosis and everybody went insane. This highly educated group of people, the German people, were highly educated, the most educated at that time. That's why we hired them for Operation Paperclip later, because we weren't going to let all that good education go to waste. I mean, come on, we need it for us. They were an advanced people, and he says that they went mad in the 30s. They went mad under Hitler. I don't think that's fair because they didn't go mad. This is just like when we used to debate in high school and everything leads to nuclear war. I don't know if you did debate when you were a kid, but the end goal of every debate case is everything leads to nuclear war. We can't do this because it'll lead to nuclear war. Well, the Nazi comparison is the nuclear war that we use now. Well, we can't do this because the Nazis did it. Well, Hitler was vegetarian. Does that mean it's wrong to be vegetarian? Being vegetarian leads to Nazis. What? No. That's not how it works. Not everything that the Nazis ever did is so foreign. This is very hard for people to accept. Even today, they try to say, no, you're a Nazi. No, you're a Nazi. No, you're a Nazi. The Nazis were the Nazis. And that was a reaction to a unique period in history. So, point taken, Dr. Malone. However, I don't think that it's fair to equate 1930s Germany with modern mass formation psychosis, whatever it should mean. Now that brings us to this. Are the branch Covidians, you know this term, the people who think that COVID is going to end the world, people who are still in their house and haven't left their house for 18 months. I feel really bad for these people. Maybe go outside, just get some sunlight. I don't know, but we call them the branch Covidians online. Are these people experiencing a mass formation psychosis? Bill Maher kind of broke this down best when he said that most of them believe that half of people who get COVID are going to wind up in the hospital. That's just an exaggerated number. The percentage of unvaccinated people that will wind up in the hospital from COVID is less than 1%, and only a fraction of them will pass on from it. Most of those people have underlying conditions. That's just the truth. So, to a certain degree, these people are experiencing a sort of mass delusion. But is it a delusion when all of the sources that they consider to be correct, all of the news outlets, are saying this? How much of a delusion is it then? And we do know that a lot of people have died from COVID. They probably know people who have died from COVID or know someone who has died from COVID. Are they really going mad? I feel that their information is just skewed. Now, a lot of you are saying, well, go find the real information. These stats are available. Bill Maher was screaming it on his show. Why don't they know the real information? Well, they don't. There's so many news outlets now. It's not like it was in 1970 where there were 3 evening newses and they told you pretty much the same thing. It's not the same thing anymore. It's changed. So if they're not watching an independent news outlet, or if they're watching too many opinion pieces, too many hot takes, they're not going to ever get this information. And then, of course, there is that third. And I think that third is a good number. I really do think that Dr. Desmet was right to say it's about a third of people who, it doesn't matter what you tell them, they're still going to believe that it's a deadly, deadly disease because it was when they first saw it coming out of Italy. It was in New York. They remember those images more than they remember stats because at the end of the day, we remember images seared into our brain more than we remember writing and stats, et cetera, et cetera. I'm going to leave it to you as to whether the branch Covidians are actually experiencing mass formation psychosis. Now, the flip side to that is, are all these conspiracy theorists experiencing mass formation psychosis? Well, you see, it's so vague. It is so vague that yes, they seem to be. There's isolation, things have been taken away, free-floating anxiety, an authority figure offers a solution. So many things could fall into this. So yeah. Also, the conspiracy theorists are experiencing some sort of mass formation psychosis. So I don't want to get caught up in semantics. Who's experiencing mass formation psychosis and who isn't? We all are to some degree or another at some point in our lives, whether it's to this or something else. It's just so common. This groupthink thing is so common that it's going to happen. It's what humans are. We are a group. We're a group species. We work in groups. We learn in groups. We copy other people. More so than other animals. Not all other animals do this. Some things to note is that this lockdown has increased mental illness. We know that. I am terrified to look at the agoraphobia numbers that are going to come out after this. A lot more people are going to become agoraphobic. A lot of them will have to go on disability because they are too afraid to leave their house. And maybe that's unjustified, but people's brains work differently. And so we can't say that this person should just get over it and leave the house. It's really hard to say that. So I don't want to even see the agoraphobia numbers that are going to come out after this. The depression numbers, the weight gain numbers, we've seen some of those. Those are really terrifying. It seems as though those models did not come to fruition. All the models that we based the lockdown off of, they did not come to fruition. It's okay. It's okay to say that we got something wrong. We did our best at the time and we got it wrong. And Mattias Desmet pointed it out, and I think there's a lot to be said for what he is lecturing over YouTube. I can't wait. He's got a book coming out about this. I can't wait for it. I'm going to read it and give you a summary. Don't worry. You don't have to read it yourself. On this channel, y'all don't have to read anything. That's the rule. But remember, this is not unique to COVID. This is not unique to 2020. This is not unique to either side. This is something that we constantly have to watch out for, which is why I want to end this on a positive note. Because look, mass formation psychosis, this is not unique to the current time. It's happened many times in our history. It's going to happen again because we're humans, and this is how we interact with each other. And this is how we interact to information, especially when we're being fed selective information. However, the positive note is this, is that if we can note it from the internet, yes, the internet is causing it, whatever. The internet may be causing it, but nevertheless, if we can note it from the internet, what is happening, and we can stop it, well, that's new. That's evolution. That's an invention, the internet actually helping us stave off what could be a disaster. Okay, so yeah, maybe it's too late for this one. Some of you have to point out these things. Some of you just in the comments like, well, too late now. Well, so what? The next one, and it's not too late for this one in every country. Australia lost its mind. Let's all acknowledge Australia has lost its mind. But the United States hasn't quite lost its mind yet, and many other countries have not gone mad yet. Me personally, on this channel, you know I love a good trip down madness lane. You know I love it. It's beautiful. It's artistic. It's not good for the real world. So if we can use the internet and we can use the power of communication to stave off another awful event, a witch trials or a genocide or whatever, fingers crossed that Dr. Malone is wrong about the effects of the shot. Fingers crossed, because if he's not wrong, if he's right, then it's too late. Absolutely too late for this one. But if he's wrong, or if in fact the shots have no long-term harmful side effects, which we are hoping and praying that they do not, and so far we haven't seen widespread harmful side effects, then it's not too late for this one. It's not too late for this one. So I'm hopeful that in the past few years we have developed a technology that might actually be able to keep madness at bay, so long as we are aware when we start putting our toes into the madness, and we can take it back. This might actually be a good thing in the end. So let me know what you think. Is it too late for this one? Is the internet actually a tool that we can use to help advance humanity, or is it going to be the end of us? Subscribe.